Hi, boys and girls. This is Grandma Sheilla with another story for you today. Story is an old story that happened back in the days of flour mills and those types of things and riding horses to get to places. Well, the story, I'm going to call It Doesn't Matter How Sincere You Are. It matters what's right. Well, boys and girls, Jack and David, they were on their way to go to the grist mill. In olden days, could take your dried corn and your wheat too, and they would grind it into flour for you, because you couldn't just go to the grocery store and pick up a bag of flour. You had to cut the grain out of your field and then take it to the mill. They were on their way to the mill. They had that bag of corn on the back of the horse, and both of them, Jack and David, were riding on top of the horse. Well, Jack was older than David, and he always wanted his little brother to know that he knew more than he did. Well, they were excited about this because they didn't oftentimes get to go to the mill. Well, they could see it off in the distance, and they were excited. Well, they got there, and there was a lot of other people there that wanted their grain ground into either cornmeal or wheat flour. But the boys didn't mind. They were glad they had to wait their turn. So they put their horse into a shed. They went off to look at this little section of the village that was called the corner. Well, the corner had several interesting places for boys in it. One, of course, was the mill. They could have just stayed there and listened or watched the miller grind on the big stones up their corn, but they wanted to see the rest of the places. Not only was the mill there was a store there. And in those days, a store, a general store, had everything you might want. And they liked to look at the shotguns for killing rabbits, and there were some unsavory places at the corner as well, places that we're not going to talk about. Well, the boys, they went down the little wooden sidewalk. They looked at this and they looked at that. They went up and down that sidewalk. Well, finally, when they were outside walking, it started to rain. And there they stood outside, and the rain was just coming down on them. And David said, "Let's go back to the mill." So they did. Well, not only had they left their big bag of corn, they'd left that there at the mill. They went over to the miller and they asked him how much longer they'd need to wait. And the man told them when their turn would be. So the boys sat down. Their mom had made each of them a wonderful lunch. So they sat down to eat. Well, then they waited for the miller to get done grinding their corn. It wasn't too much longer till here came the miller with their big cloth sack that had the corn in it over his shoulder, and he carried it to the boys and he said, "Go get your horse." David and Jack went out into the rain and found their horse, and they brought it back in front of the mill, and the miller put that big sack over the top of the horse. Jack got on the front of the horse, and David got on right behind him. And the miller said, "I'm really sorry, boys, that it's so late. And I know it's a long ways home for you." And he looked up at the weather. It was not gently raining anymore. There were big black clouds up in the sky now. And the rest of the sky was turning a dark gray. Jack, he didn't want anybody to think he was afraid. So they took off. You know, when it's stormy and the clouds get really dark, evening and night comes sooner. Well, they rode along that wooded path. They called it a road. It was dirt. But as they went through those trees, it got darker and darker. Jack said, "It's okay. I'll get you there." So Dave, he just rode along behind his brother. His brother was thinking about what he'd heard in the mill. He had heard the miller's son talking to the squire's son. A squire in those days was a very rich person that kind of told other people what to do. He lived in a big house, and people listened to him. Well, the miller's son said, "You know, you really need to pay attention to what the Bible says, because you're going to get yourself in big trouble if you don't know the truth. And the only place that the truth is written is in the Bible." And the squire's son, he kind of stood up taller, and he said, "Well, I believe that if you are just sincere, that means that you honestly believe something. Whatever I believe is right. I don't need anything or anybody else telling me what's right. I don't need somebody else to tell me truth." Jack was thinking about that while he was riding on top of that horse, and he thought, you know, I like what the squire's son said. I think that whatever I believe to be right is right. Well, they kept riding along. It was a long ways to go toward home. Before they had left home, their father had told them, "Now, if it gets late and you have to come home when it's late, I want you to take the main road." Well, the main road was dirt as well. But Father said, "The reason I want you to take that is because you have to cross the stream. And it's spring now, and it's been raining and raining, and the stream will be really full of water. It'll probably be going over its banks. So I want you to take the main road, because there's a bridge over the stream." Well, both boys had agreed with that. Well, it wasn't too long till the boys on the horse came to the fork in the road. they didn't go very often to the mill, so they weren't accustomed to remembering which way they should go. Jack, he stopped the horse and he looked around. Which way should I go? Well, as he was looking, Dave said, "Over there, I see a light. I think there's a cabin over there. I can just get down and I'll run over there and ask them which way's the right way to go." And Jack said, "That's a big waste of time, and we don't have time for that. I believe I know the right way." Dave looked at him and said, "You think you know which is the right way? Don't you think we should ask somebody that knows?" Jack got mad. He said, "I know what I'm doing." They took off down that road that Jack thought was the right way to go. Well, it was still a long ways, and it was a winding road that went through the woods. And by now, the wind had picked up, and the trees above them were just beating around them. And you know how when it's really windy, it gets really noisy. Plus, the rain had picked up. Those black clouds had opened up, and the rain was coming down in sheets. Well, there was nothing they could do but just ride on. Finally, it was so terribly dark. But Jack could hear what he was sure was that stream. And it wasn't making the nice, soft, bubbly sound that a stream generally makes. No, it wasn't. It was rushing, almost making waves inside of that water now. Well, they could hear it a little bit. But Jack was still thinking about how he knew how everything was right. And he turned to his brother and he said, "Dave, what are you going to say when we get across the bridge down here?" Dave said, "I'll say, I'll be thankful to be across." Well, Jack, he just charged on ahead. He reached with his hand and he went on the back end of that horse. And of course, the horse picked up its speed. And before either boy knew what was going to happen, that horse went right into the creek. There was no bridge there. They were on the wrong road. Well, it was really deep. And Dave, he slid right off the side of the horse into the water. But lucky for him, his hand was still holding on to the reins of the horse. So, although the horse was really deep in the water and it was trying to swim, Jack, as he was being pulled along, reached out for a piece of a log that had been coming down that rapid water. And then he thought, "Where's David? David! David!" Pretty soon a little voice, not close to where Jack was, said, "God have mercy on me." And Dave said, "Jack, I'm here somewhere." Dave was actually holding on to a branch that went over that creek. Well, boys and girls, they both made it out of that water. Neither one of them or the horse died. But when they got on the other side, that big bag of cornmeal was gone. And Jack said, "Where's the cornmeal?" And Dave said, "It's probably in the bottom of the stream, making a big puddle of glue." Well, you know why he called it glue? It was because if you take a whole sack of flour and put it in water, what does it turn to? And if there's rushing water, it just disintegrates and goes down the stream. Jack, they got back on the horse, and he started muttering to himself, "I thought I knew the right way. I thought I did. I believed that I did." But was Jack right? No. Jack didn't know the right way to go. He just thought he did. And you know, Jesus cautions us in the Bible. He gives us all the information we need to go the right way, the Jesus way, so that we can live with him someday in heaven. Don't just think you know the right way. Make sure that you do know the right way. Use God's instruction book, the Bible. Thank you, boys and girls. I'll see you next week. Bye-bye now.